In today's session, we're going to be looking at how to stop arguments from stopping our love. Because often what happens is when we look at couples on YouTube or we look at couples on social media and we see that everybody seems to be having such a wonderful time, everybody seems to be having such a wonderful relationship with each other. But what often people don't realize is that behind the scenes, there are arguments happening. And the key that we're going to be discussing today is how to stop those arguments from actually destroying the relationship in the first place. Actually, every couple, every healthy couple also argues. But there's a way to do it in a healthy way, and there's a way to do it in an unhealthy way. And today we're going to explore what that means and how to bring your arguments, how to bring those discussions rather than arguments in the couple. So let's look at what do we argue about in the first place. So I'm going to talk about specifically couples, although in one sense you could use these techniques and these points to kind of look at any relationship, whether it's couples or whether it's between you and your parents or you and your kids, adult kids. You can use the same principles. So what do we argue about? What's really going on? And then we're going to look at how to develop healthy arguing. So I'm going to ask you to say in the chat now, what are some of the common reasons that people argue? And especially this is couples, even if they're just boyfriend, girlfriend, fiancés, and obviously married people. So what do they often argue about? If you could say in the chat, and I'm going to list some of the reasons that I've dealt with. Now, I'm a relationship coach. I often do mediation, and people bring me into the picture, and then I sit and I listen and I discuss. First of all, understand what is the reason why they're arguing. So I'm going to list some of the points here, some of the topics or themes that people argue over. So one of them is housework. I'm sure many of you captured that one. The central heating. How many of you have parents who still argue to this day about the central heating? One of them wants it turned down, one of them wants it turned up. I was in the garage the other day, and it was really hot in the office, in their office. And then when I was discussing with them, they were saying how the manager keeps turning the heating down, but the manager wasn't in that day, so they'd turn the heating right up. So this doesn't just happen in the household; it happens in the office as well. What else? Why else do people argue? Extended family. So sometimes I hear this word used. So although of course they're normally termed in-laws, sometimes I hear this term outlaws. Oh, what are you doing for Christmas? Oh, the outlaws are coming. And people say it like that. So they sometimes have issues with their in-laws, and that can sometimes lead to arguments. When a partner is watching or playing sport too much. So this is typically the wife arguing with the husband that he's watching or playing sport too much. And often there are arguments about finances. This is a bit of a deeper one. So we'll come back to that one. Then not spending enough time together, and this often stems from work-life balance, not having the right work-life balance. If somebody's spending too much time at work and they're not spending enough time at home, and developing that proper relationship with not just the spouse but all the family members, including their responsibilities for their kids. It's not just one spouse's responsibility to look after the kids. It's both. It's a shared responsibility. And sometimes there's arguments that happen because of a difference of opinion. Somebody feels this about something, somebody feels that about something, and they just argue so crazily over it. Sometimes we encourage couples to read together. So they might read together. It might be even a spiritual book or some kind of scripture. And sometimes when they're reading, I will often get the feedback that, oh, we argued so much over this point. He believes this and she believes that. And so I have to bring the two together and help them to actually understand, no, you guys have differences of opinion, and that is allowed. It's okay to have differences of opinion. And then it could be something like feeling neglected. So when somebody feels neglected, that can often lead to arguments, and it comes back to expectations not being met. Yes, somebody said in the comments. So please write in the comments anything I've missed there, anything else that you can think of. Why do couples argue? Now, we discussed, in one sense, we touched on the external reasons. Apart from that last one, I did that one on purpose. So if you look at these reasons, whether it's finances or something else, what is actually the underlying reason? And it's often because an emotional need or some kind of need is not being met. And often it is an emotional need. So if we look at some of these ones that we spoke about, so for example, housework, that's a very external thing. But what's underlyingly the issue? What need is not being met? So it could be something like the person is not feeling supported. When a couple are together and they're managing a household, they want to feel like it is a teamwork. It's a team effort. But when equal responsibilities are not being done for the housework, often a person may feel unsupported. And it is that feeling, it is that lack of, the lack of feeling supported that then causes the argument, and it drives them to get angry or feel resentful or so many other emotions out there, which lead then to heated arguments. It's not just about the housework. There's a deeper issue. So in arguments, I'll say this now. So in arguments, often, although we're arguing, shall we say, at this level, if we take it down a notch, if we go to the deeper level, you'll see actually they're arguing about these things. But the problem becomes that if we only keep the argument at the, shall we say, the external level, you don't get to the root issues. And so the argument can just escalate, or it can just go on and on and on and on forever, because you're not actually you're not resolving the real issue, the underlying issue. So when we understand the underlying reason for the argument, now we can start to get to the root issue. And this is often what I do. When I go to couples who are arguing, I'll listen to what they're talking about, and then we'll look at the underlying real, like what's really going on under the hood. So they might argue because there's no time. They're not having a work-life balance, or somebody's spending too much time with their friends or video games or whatever it is. So what's the underlying reason? Is there's not enough attention being given to the relationship. What about finances? What about finances? So when somebody is having arguments over finances, it is often because there is a feeling of insecurity there. And so that feeling of insecurity is what is actually driving the arguments. Now, extended family, the outlaws. What do we do about that? How do we address that? What's really going on? Sometimes there could be many reasons for this. I've dealt with different reasons. So I'll just give you two as examples here. Sometimes it is wanting that feeling of being accepted by them. So this is especially for, shall we say, the daughter-in-law that comes into the family, and she wants to have that feeling of acceptance. She wants to feel that the in-laws, especially, and the extended family, the sister-in-laws generally, they are kind of bringing her into the inner circle of the family. And often when that doesn't happen, that can create a lot of arguments. A lot of insecurity is created. And sometimes there might be in-laws who are there, and sometimes they may be suffocating the couple. Sometimes it's both of them. and because of the influence of the in-laws, they want control. They want to dictate how that couple does things, and so it feels like they're being suffocated. So again, that can lead to arguments. Now, difference of opinion. What might the underlying reason for that be? So it could be something like they don't feel respected, so they feel disrespected. They're having that discussion, and somebody puts their opinion very strongly and disrespects their opinion. It might be that they don't feel valued. Their opinion is not being valued in the sense of accepted or at least considered, like that. So then that leads to an argument, because underlyingly that person is feeling like, well, only their opinion matters and not mine. So we don't feel valued. So these, when we understand the deeper or the underlying argument, the underlying reason for the argument, now we can start to address and resolve the real issue. It's not just there's a difference of opinion. Difference of opinions are going to be there. The in-laws, we don't have control over. In some instances, we don't have control over the finances. So how do we handle these external situations? Actually, we have to resolve the internal, shall we say, the emotional needs that aren't being met. That's the key thing. So there are different types of arguments that can happen. So as I said at the beginning, there are healthy arguments, there are unhealthy arguments, and as part of unhealthy arguments, there is what's called bickering. LICA stands for, I've forgotten what it stands for now. Something, a low intensity chronic arguments. That's it. Low intensity chronic arguments. So bickering is where there's unresolved things going on, and the arguments may not be so heated, they may not be so loud, they may not be like physical or violent like that, but it's just this constant underlying smarmy comments that are being made here and there at each other, and it's an ongoing thing that happens. So this happens often because there are unresolved arguments, unresolved emotions, unresolved issues, which have built up. And therefore, this is constant. Every little thing now annoys that person. So that is definitely a red flag. So if that is going on, yes, we definitely need to address that. And then another one is silent treatment. So silent treatment is again where, in one sense, it's not shall we say, a verbal argument. It is an argument going on quietly. It's an argument going on under the surface. It's like mind games that often happen. And again, silent treatment, this LICA bickering, these are red flags. So if these are happening in your relationship, what I'd definitely say is sort it out ASAP, because this is a sign that the relationship is now dying. So these are quite serious ones. And of course there are other types of argument, but I'll just keep it to that for today. I'm going to focus today on healthy argument and also the unhealthy argument, and how we deal with that. So let's look at the healthy argument cycle. As I was saying earlier, every couple will argue, right? It's very natural. We come from different backgrounds. So a couple will often come from different backgrounds. Even if they are coming from similar backgrounds, they are still male and female. They still think differently. They're still individual people. So we will always have some kind of differences of opinion, different values, even if they're coming from the same background. So what to speak of if you're coming from different backgrounds? So there will be times where those differences of opinion will create emotions and will lead to arguments. Now, how do we deal with that? So, especially at the beginning of the relationship, there is great harmony. There's that honeymoon period, isn't it? So the person can't do any wrong. It's like, I don't know, you wake up in the morning, and even if it's raining, it's just like, oh, what a beautiful day, because you're just so in love, and all of that kind of thing going on. So there may be this harmony, especially at the beginning of the relationship. But then at some point, there will be some difference of opinion. There will be some reason or other that it will lead to disharmony. And here's the key now. The relationship needs to go through a process of repair to bring it back to harmony. So that's important. Every relationship, every healthy relationship will go through this cycle. It's not that marriage or a couple in love never go through disharmony. Then that is also a red flag, in the sense of it sounds like, unless they have healthy discussions, I'll come to that in a moment, but there will always be some disagreement in some way or another, because they're two healthy individuals. If they're not disagreeing about something, then actually indicates that they're not expressing what's truly going on inside. So every relationship, every healthy relationship will go through this cycle. And this is even true of friends. Sometimes friends will argue, and then it's like, oh my God, like, are we good? And it's like, yeah, you get to a process of, you go through a process of resolving it, and then you're sometimes it even makes you better friends. And even in this cycle, sometimes when people argue, when couples argue, and then they go through the process of repair, they actually become stronger. It strengthens their bond with each other. It's beautiful. It's part of the process. So let's look at let's break it down. What does a healthy argument cycle look like? So you've got some disagreement there. Now, sometimes it may lead to a heated argument. Sometimes in the process of disagreeing, the emotions do flare up. That's okay. Because after that, we bring it down to, or back to, a discussion. Not an argument, not a heated argument. We bring it to a discussion. So it may go through that fluctuation where there are high emotions, shall we say, but then we bring it back to discussion, where the two people are actually listening to each other. And then the idea is to bring it to understanding what's really going on here, and to resolve it as far as possible. Sometimes you can't always resolve it, but at least you kind of agree to disagree. In other words, you bring it to some understanding. Let me say this here. One reason why people argue is because we have to have the full story in our head, that our brains can't deal with a vacuum. So if we know this piece of information, and then we kind of know this piece of information, but we don't know the underlying reason, we don't know, shall we say, the in-between, we don't know what's going on in the other person's head, we will make up the story to create the link. Because like I said, the brain can't have a vacuum. The brain will make up the in-between story. And of course, we always go to the worst case scenario. It's just the nature of the brain to protect us. It always thinks of, oh my God, maybe he's thinking something really bad. Like I saw one cartoon, one humorous cartoon picture, and it was a couple lying in bed, and the husband was looking up at the ceiling, and the wife was lying next to him, and just kind of looking a bit nervously. And she was nervous because he was quiet. So she started thinking, and there was a speech bubble there, and that was saying, oh, why is he quiet? Why is he not talking to me? Maybe he's seen how large my thighs have become. Maybe he's noticed this and that about me. And all this speculation was going on in her head. She was getting really worried. And then if you looked across at the husband's speech bubble, it was, I wonder how flies land upside down on the ceiling. So I thought that was a good demonstration of what can happen when there isn't communication. So like I said, our brain will make up the story, and we'll always think of the worst case scenario. And often it's something bad about ourselves, especially if we kind of have that inclination to think bad about ourselves. So it's important that we bring it to understanding, because when there is healthy conversations, when there's a healthy discussion, now the other person can actually fill in the blank rather than speculating what's the reason why this person is acting this way, when we actually have healthy communication and understanding, it's like, okay, now I know the story. Now, even if I don't agree with the story, at least you understand what the story is. At least, like I said, you can agree to disagree. So that is the healthy argument cycle. And the key here is how to change it from a heated argument to a discussion. So I'm going to ask you to say in the chat, have you got any ideas of how you might change a heated discussion in that heat of the moment when, let's say you're about to say something really harsh to your partner? How could you now, shall we say, bring it to a discussion instead? So while you're writing in the chat, I will give you some pointers. So I'm planning to discuss this in more detail in the next episode. Today I wanted to give some opportunity for questions, more opportunity just to kind of give you the overview, and then some questions, and then next episode we'll kind of break it down even deeper. So just to give you some hint or tips, how to stop the heated argument, the first thing is recognize that you are in a heated argument. Often what happens is we just get totally lost in the argument, especially if we feel our ego is being attacked, or if we have some kind of emotional wound and that person has just pressed on or triggered an emotional wound, and that will often lead to almost like uncontrollable emotions. So becoming more self-aware is an important part of being in a relationship. The first and the most important relationship, so I will say this, first and the most important relationship is the relationship with who? The relationship with yourself. So that requires you to be self-aware. And the more you can become self-aware, the more you can recognize, why are you so angry? And sometimes you're angry and it's not even the other person's fault. Maybe they've just said a word or something which triggered you. That's on you. That's you have to learn to deal with that, rather than blaming the other person for that. They didn't necessarily know that. So the first thing about a heated argument is to kind of become aware that you're in this high emotional state, and then to take a step out. So sometimes it requires, okay, honey, babe, whatever you call your partner, all right, let's take a break. This is not, we're not getting to a resolution here. Let's take a breather and let's actually come back to this conversation when we are in a better state. Now, it might be you need 5 minutes. Sometimes you might need 2 hours. You might need to actually have. But the danger here, or not the danger, I guess you could say there's a danger, is that make sure there is a set time where you do actually continue the discussion and you bring it to a discussion. The danger is when the other person says, oh, I just need a break, I need a time, but then they don't actually ever come back to the conversation. Avoidant personalities often are like this. They'll say, I need a break, but they're just trying to avoid it. And then you have the anxious personality type. So these are attachment styles. You have the anxious attachment style, and they want to discuss it straight away as much as possible. So sometimes when the emotions are high, when it has escalated, you have to take a break, but then define how long that break is, and then come back to the conversation in a much better state. And then you can deal with that. I remember I was in that situation in an office argument, and it was with a work colleague, and he was saying some things that were really critical of me, and I kind of lost the plot. And I recognized that, and I said, okay, just give me 5 minutes. And I walked out and I calmed myself down. I remember saying some affirmations to myself, like, don't take it personally, like he's not, he's in his state or whatever. And I worked on my own emotions. By the time I came back to the room 5 minutes later, his mood had totally changed. It's like he had switched. Maybe he had also recognized that it was his own issue, and he dealt with that, and then he spoke nicely to me, spoke calmly, and we had a wonderful discussion after that. So sometimes it is required to take a break, take some space, kind of gather your thoughts again, gather yourself up and come back in a much better state and be in the mood to want to resolve the argument. Very important. So the state you're in while you're arguing is very important, because if you're in the wrong state, all you're thinking about is how to argue back. You're not actually listening. Neither person is actually listening in that heated argument. That's why there's no point. When I do mediation, often what I'll do is, so there's some mediation techniques that I use. So I'll sit them down, and one of the, shall we say, the rules of mediation is you're not allowed to speak emotionally. If the person gets really emotional, then I'll ask them to either step out of the room, take a breather, or just take 1 minute just to calm themselves down, and then talk. Because when we talk emotionally, the other person often doesn't hear the words that we say; they hear the emotion that we say, and that can then escalate. So if we really want understanding, we need to actually listen and hear what the other person is saying, actually absorb what the other person is saying. But like I said, more about that in another session, another episode. So I hope that helps. Hope that gives you some ideas. Okay, so through this process then, through bringing it back to a discussion, even if it gets heated, we bring it back to a discussion. Now we go through the process of repair and bring it back to harmony. Sometimes this process of repair does require external help, and often that's when people will call me and say, Nij, you know what, can you come and just help resolve this? And I've done this for many couples, and some of the wives have actually told me I saved their marriage. Like if I hadn't come in and stepped in and gone through this process of repair with them, they can now do it themselves. I've taught them how to do it themselves. But if we hadn't gone through this process of repair, they often say they wouldn't be together anymore. So it's important. Sometimes you do need to get external help. Right, so now what happens with the unhealthy argument cycle? There is a process of there is disagreement, and then there is a heated argument. But then, because it stays as a heated argument, it doesn't go to understanding. There is some unresolved anger and hurt that's left over. And maybe because, gradually they kind of forget it. They get on with their day, they start talking to their friends or somebody else, and gradually they kind of forget that unresolved anger and hurt, and it kind of gets buried. So then there's some temporary calm between the couple. But then all that's required is there's some kind of trigger, and bang, it leads to more disagreement, and then the heated argument again, and just keeps going round that cycle. So let me give you an example. So a female might express her feelings, and then the typical thing a male will do is give her solutions and tell her why she shouldn't be feeling that way. So if I'm going to be first to put my hand up and say and confess that yes, I have often done this, and then I realize, or my wife will sometimes tell me, or whoever it is might tell me that, you know what, don't give me solutions. And I'm like, sometimes even my daughter will say that. So I have to, as a male, we are so solution orientated. We hear of a problem and we immediately go to solutions. But especially when a female, even when a male actually, but especially when a female is expressing some problem, some emotional problem, it's to do with emotions, and it's not about fixing them. It's not about fixing the emotion. It's not about, do this or do that. So when a male tells her why she shouldn't feel that way, or he gives some kind of solution, then that makes her feel her emotions are invalidated, which then makes her more upset, because it's like, he doesn't understand me. He doesn't recognize what I'm going through. He doesn't hear me. He doesn't see me. And that's what then leads to escalation of the argument. And he's thinking, I just gave her my best solution. He's put his Mr. Fix-It hat on, and he's like, I'm going to be her hero, and I'm going to give her the best solution that I could think of. And she just rejected my solution. And so He then feels her disapproval and he expects her to apologize. And so can you see how this just escalates and escalates, and neither party feels, shall we say, that they've got to a resolution. Both parties are feeling more and more upset with each other because neither one of them are getting their needs actually addressed. The husband, or the male in this situation, is trying to be her hero, and instead he's getting her disapproval. So as a result, he's now feeling like, attacked, and she's feeling like her emotions are being invalidated. So she's feeling attacked. So neither person is going to leave this argument or this discussion happy. So you can see that when this kind of thing happens, now it's left unresolved hurt or anger there. And so what happens is this trigger will keep happening, and then it lead to another disagreement, and this cycle keeps going round and round and round. So just on this point, and I'll just kind of bring it to a close. So have your questions prepared, and please use the chat, write your questions even after the live. If you have any questions, please write them in the chat, and I like to read them and I'll answer them as much as possible. So every relationship has two cups. Look at it like that. So I'm using this as a metaphor. And this is not just couples, this is between you and your parents, you and your kids, friends, work colleagues. Every relationship, every, shall we say, like significant relationship will have two cups. So there is a positive cup and there is a negative cup. And as much as possible, what we want to do is put things in the positive cup. And the reason why is because inevitably we will do something wrong. Inevitably we will make a mistake in a relationship. Inevitably, we'll upset somebody in some way or another. We'll say something accidentally or whatever it is. So the more we have in the positive cup, the more forgiving or easy it is for the other person to kind of let go of these little things that we might do. The problem is that if the negative cup is being added to, and gradually more and more and more and more and more, and getting to this point, as you can see, this negative cup is now nearly reached its full capacity. And when that happens, this relationship is finished. Whatever that kind of relationship, like I said, even if it's a work colleague or maybe even your boss, and especially with your partner, when this negative cup gets too full, it's already too late, in one sense, for the relationship to survive. So become now aware of this. If there is a significant relationship, and especially if you have been through arguments with that person, just do a quick analysis and understand actually what is the positive of this relationship. How much do I have in the positive cup? How do I feel about this person in terms of the positive cup? And how do I feel in terms of the negative cup? And is it starting to get too full? And like I said, if it is starting to get too full, it's like a red alert for the relationship. Because as you keep going through this unhealthy argument cycle, sometimes, I may put here heated argument, you could even say this is even with the silent treatment. The person keeps doing something wrong, you keep going around the cycle. And what's happening is that negative cup is getting more and more and more full. And it's at this point often that people come to me and say, Nij, can you help us out? Like, sort out this relationship, or sort out our marriage, whatever it is. It's like at breaking point. I'm always like, I wish you had come to me earlier, because there is very little tolerance now left in often it's the individual, one or other individual. There's very little tolerance left in that individual. It makes it very difficult now to fully repair the relationship. So I always tell people, and I want to kind of put this message out there, that even if when you do the analysis, if you find, even if like, let's say 50% or more, but definitely even if it's reached 50% in the negative cup, reach out for help, whether it's me or whether it's somebody else. Reach out to get help, because if you don't nip this now, and this argument cycle keeps happening, what's going to happen is that negative cup is going to get more and more and more and more and more full, to the point where you will not have a window of tolerance left, and that it's pretty much, the relationship is pretty much over. Like I said, often people have come to me when that emotional cup is too full, and it's very difficult to stop the relationship from breaking. I have had a situation where the relationship did break, and I really worked on it happened to be the female in this case. I really worked on the female and helped her to deal with the internal world. She had a very wrong story about herself, very bad relationship with herself. So once we identified what the issues were and resolved them within her, she actually became much more positive in herself. The guy who had broken up with her, he then got back with her, and they're happily married like that. So, but it's not always the case. Often what happens is when they go through a breakup, and unless they're going through a process of, shall we say, dealing with the relationship, as in working on themselves, it's very difficult to get back into the relationship. Again, I'll talk more about this in the next episode. So I'll just finish by saying this last point. So in an argument, it's you and her or him versus the problem. So when we look at the problem, when we look at, whatever the theme is, whether it's finances, whether it's housework, whether it's, I don't know, you can't decide on the decor of the house, or even whatever it is, the responsibilities of the kids, look at it as it's you and the spouse, you and your partner, versus the problem, not you versus her or him. That's a big difference. So I'll finish there, and if you have any questions, please write the questions in the chat. Like I said, even if you're watching the recording of this, please write your questions in the chat and I'll come back to you. Now, I do these sessions, these weekly wisdom sessions, every week, generally, and you'll find out all the details on this website, www.nijdey.com/events. And there'll be other live events as well. So I do this as a weekly event online, but I am also doing in-person events. So if you go to that website, you'll be able to see other events that are happening. And I have an online course which is called Heartbreak to Heartfelt, and this specifically helps you to deal with the relationship with yourself. Often people will go through heartbreak, and a lot of emotional difficulties come from that. And I spoke in episode 4 of Weekly Wisdom about this idea of emotional dependence and emotional codependence. And the model of emotional codependence is much more suitable for being in a relationship. When we're in emotional dependence in a relationship, that's what leads to a lot of arguments. So strengthening and building the relationship with yourself is at the heart of all other relationships. I will say this point, that other relationships, the external relationships, are a reflection of the relationship you have with yourself. So if you find people are disrespecting you, often one of the reasons could be because you don't fully respect yourself. They cross boundaries because you don't uphold those boundaries. You may even say those boundaries, but because you don't uphold them, then other people don't uphold them. See, so strengthening the relationship with ourselves is at the heart of actually having good relationships with other people. So this course, Heartbreak to Heartfelt, discusses that's like a 2-hour course, and it helps you to, it's like a workshop, exercises there, helps you to go deeper. Now, if there are issues with your partner and you do feel like that negative cup, you can see you're going around this cycle and that negative cup is starting to get full, and you can feel like, okay, this relationship is not going in the right way, then please get in touch also. there's a www.nijday.com/contact, or you can just write something in the comments below, and then I'll get in touch. Okay. So do we have any questions? Let's have a look. And please write any more questions if you have. So I'll just quickly read through some of these comments. When expectations are not met, there are arguments. Yes, that's right at the beginning. Very good. So in regards to silent treatment, is there a way to get the other person to speak up? Now, often it is the case, I'm stereotyping here, I'm just giving this as an example. Often it is the case, it is that the female wants to talk about it and the male is the one who is silent. It's not always the case, sometimes it is the other way around. So in general, one of the reasons why is because males tend to not be able to process their emotions so well. If they haven't been taught, they often can't express or process their emotions very well. And so, what's his name? I think his name is John Gray. Yes, John Gray has written this really good book, Men Come From Mars, Women Come From Venus. So he talks about this concept of men go into their cave, and they go into the cave, but the female often goes into the cave with them and says, come on, let's talk about it. But he wants to actually process things. So what is important is to give them some space. That it is important to often give that person some space to be able to process, but there must be a, shall we say, a caveat where they have to then talk about it. You give them some space, like maybe you ask them, okay, you need some space to talk about this. When would you like to talk about? Like, it's not just, okay, we'll talk about when you're ready, because they'll never be ready. And often is the case, it is, again, I'm stereotyping here, but it's often the case, the male attachment style is avoidant. So they will never be ready. They will never want to talk about whatever the issue is. Now, you're never going to resolve it if that's the case. So it's like, again, about boundaries, and you have to uphold the boundary and say, okay, I'm happy to give you space, but let me know. And you tell me now, when do you think you'll be ready? Okay, you need 1 day, you need 2 days, you need a week, whatever it is. And then kind of put it in the diary of when you're going to speak. So when they've got a deadline, then they actually have to process it. Then they know they have to do it. But avoidant will try to not talk about it. So you've got to be gentle, you've got to be sensitive, and sometimes it's like, maybe, I don't know, you even sit there and just say, okay, I just want to hold the space. Sometimes it's like that when I'm doing a therapy session. Sometimes I'll ask a question about somebody's emotion, and for a while they'll just sit there silently, and I'll just sit them and I'll hold that space for them. It's uncomfortable. And it is uncomfortable when that person is processing the emotion. So I'll hold that space for them. And then when they're ready, they'll speak. Or I'll ask a question and they'll just sit there silently. And then eventually, then they'll say something. Obviously, if it's too long, so let's say it's more than 3 minutes or 4 minutes like that, then I might ask another question to prompt them. Like that. But the point is to give them that space, and to know that, one, it's a safe space, they can be vulnerable. Now, I didn't speak about this earlier, but one of the reasons why there's arguments is somebody will be expressing something, but underlyingly they're actually asking for something else. So they may say externally as maybe it's something to do the washing up, or something to do with I don't know, like, why are they spending so much time on the video game? But so let's take that example. So maybe the wife is upset with the husband, and she complains to him, "Oh, you're spending so much time with the video games, or you're spending so much time watching sport." So what does he hear? He's hearing, she's criticizing me, or she doesn't want me to enjoy myself. That's what he hears. But actually, we can ask any female, what is she actually saying? She's saying, you don't spend enough time with me. So then often the males will ask me like, so why don't she just flip and say that? Why don't she just say that in the first place? So I have to explain to them that often is the case. She won't ask directly because of feeling vulnerable and also the fear of being rejected. If she asks directly, why don't you put the video game down and spend time with me? And he says, no, how does that feel? It's like, oh my God, the video game is more important, is more valuable, is that like that's where he wants to put his attention rather than me. And that just feels even worse. So she asks, she talks indirectly. So we have to, as males, well, I mean, it's not just it's not just females, sorry. Sometimes even males do it when they're in that certain emotion. So our job is also to kind of have that sensory, like understanding of that. Although the person is saying these words externally, what is underlyingly, what are they asking for? And when you can pick up on that, and then you resolve that directly. So it's like, I don't know, you're playing a video game, she says, oh, why are you spending so much time playing the video game? And it's just like, put it down and say, you know what, screw the video game. I'm gonna go and make you a cup of tea and let's spend some time together. That's actually what she's looking for. But because he doesn't hear the real thing of what she's saying, then then this ends up being an argument and it escalates. So yeah, sorry, going back to the original question. So how do we get a person to speak up? You're going to have to understand them. It does require us to be sensitive to that person and be able to pick up on some of these underlying issues that might be there. Sometimes they don't want to speak because it's too painful. Maybe it's their own issue. And maybe sometimes you can ask a question like, is it to do with me, or is this something you're dealing with? Sometimes I'm like, if I'm going to be honest, sometimes I'm silent, and then my wife might ask me like, is everything okay? Like, are we okay? And I'm like, oh, I'm sorry, it's not to do with you, it's my own issue. But because I have that self-awareness, therefore I can say that. But sometimes the other person might not have that self-awareness, so you might need to prompt them like, is the issue to do with us? Is it to do with the relationship? Or is there something that you're going through? Sometimes even just getting that might help you to kind of back away, back off, or give them that space, that give them that understanding. It is difficult. So definitely when somebody is the avoidant attachment, they have the avoidant attachment style, something that they need to work on, because it makes relationships very difficult. So when there's lack of communication, our mind, like I said, just starts making things up. So we have to address that. Hope that helps. Any other questions? Okay, so just to let you know, I have a music channel as well. So as we do these weekly wisdoms, we often come up with songs according to the theme of what. So you can also look up some of the songs. Some of them are quite nice. So I did a song for this, kind of kill the argument rather than kill the relationship. So yes, you can enjoy some of those songs as well. Listen to those in the background. Okay, thank you very much for watching and your kind attention. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like. And if you haven't already, please subscribe. We will be continuing different throughout the year. We'll be doing different topics. I hope you enjoyed it. All right, take care.